Today we're stepping into the world of powerful Mafia bosses, where love, power, and betrayal always go hand in hand. First time I saw fear in Lily Moretti's eyes, rain was sliding down the school windows like tears the city was trying to hide. The storm had started just before dismissal. Heavy October rain hammered against the brick walls of St. Anne's Elementary while exhausted parents crowded the front entrance with umbrellas and coffee cups and impatient expressions. I stood near the counseling office clutching a stack of attendance folders against my chest, watching third graders sprint through puddles like the world outside wasn't cold and gray and dangerous. My shift should have ended 40 minutes earlier, but Mrs. Harper from second grade had called out sick again, which meant I'd spend the afternoon covering recess duty instead of finishing paperwork. My feet ached. My cardigan smelled faintly like cafeteria, coffee, and cream, and all I wanted was to drive back to my tiny apartment in Queens, heat up canned soup, and fall asleep halfway through some reality show I'd pretend to watch. Then I saw her. Lily Moretti sat alone on the hallway bench outside the principal's office with her little hands folded tightly in her lap. 8 years old, pale skin, dark curls tucked behind one ear. The kind of little girl who looked too quiet for this world. She still wore her raincoat even though she'd been inside for almost an hour. Most kids her age bounced off walls at dismissal. Lily barely moved at all. That was the thing about her. She moved like someone taught her that taking up space was dangerous. I noticed it my first week at St. Anne's 3 months earlier. Nobody ever said much about the Moretti family directly, but whispers traveled fast in school, especially private schools in Manhattan where wealthy parents smiled too much and feared the wrong people. Don't ask questions about Lily, don't mention her father, don't get involved. The warnings came wrapped in polite smiles from teachers who suddenly checked their phones when black SUVs appeared outside pickup lanes. I didn't know much about Damien Moretti then, just enough to understand adults lowered their voices when they said his name. Just enough to notice security guards sometimes waited across the street, pretending not to watch the school entrance. Just enough to realize Lily spent most afternoons alone because other parents quietly encouraged distance. Fear spreads fast around children. Kids absorb it from adults like smoke and fabric. "Your ride late again?" I asked gently as I approached her bench. Lily looked up slowly. Her green eyes caught the fluorescent hallway lights in a way that reminded me of old glass bottles washed onto shore. Beautiful but fragile, she nodded once. No smile, no words. She rarely spoke above a whisper. "You want to help me organize art supplies while we wait?" Another tiny nod. I offered my hand. She hesitated for 2 full seconds before slipping her fingers into mine. Her hand felt ice cold. The counseling room smelled like dry erase markers and construction paper. Rain tapped steadily against the windows while Lily silently sorted colored pencils into little plastic containers beside me. Red with red. Blue with blue, perfectly organized, perfectly careful, like if she made one mistake the world might collapse around her. "You're really good at this," I said softly. The corner of her mouth almost moved, almost. Then tires screeched outside. Not loud, not dramatic, but sharp enough to make Lily freeze completely. 1 second she was holding a green pencil. The next her entire body went rigid. I looked toward the parking lot through the rain-streaked window. A dark sedan sat crooked near the curb, across from the school gates. Engine running. Headlights off despite the storm. Something twisted low in my stomach. Lily? Her breathing changed first. Tiny, shallow breaths. Her fingers tightened around the pencil hard enough her knuckles turned white. "Hey," I whispered carefully. "Look at me." She didn't. Her eyes stayed locked on that car outside like she recognized something inside it. Thunder rolled overhead. Somewhere down the hallway a child laughed loudly before disappearing through the front doors with his parents. But inside the counseling office everything suddenly felt too quiet, too still. Then the front office phone rang. Once, twice, sharp against the silence. Mrs. Delgado's nervous voice echoed faintly from the hallway. "Claire." She called. "Can you come here for a second?" I stood slowly, glancing between Lily and the sedan outside. "I'll be right back, okay?" That's when Lily grabbed my sleeve. Hard, the sudden movement shocked me because she almost never initiated contact. Her wide green eyes finally met mine, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw a genuine fear there. Not childhood nervousness, not shyness. Fear that looked too old for an 8-year-old little girl. "Don't go," she whispered, barely audible, but enough to stop my heartbeat for one terrifying second. The fear in Lily's voice did something strange to me. It wrapped around my ribs and pulled tight in a way I could not explain. Children were afraid of thunderstorms, of bad grades, of monsters under beds, They were not supposed to sound like they already knew exactly what danger looked like. I crouched beside her slowly, careful not to pull away from her grip on my sleeve. Rain continued tapping against the windows while the dark sedan sat motionless across the street outside the school gates. "Hey," I whispered gently. "You are okay?" Lily shook her head immediately. Tiny movement. Barely there, but terrified. Her green eyes stayed fixed toward the parking lot. I glanced back toward the hallway where Mrs. Delgado called my name again, more nervous this time. "Claire." I stood carefully and guided Lily behind my desk chair before walking toward the counseling room door. The fluorescent hallway lights buzzed softly overhead as I stepped into the corridor. Mrs. Delgado stood near the front office, clutching the reception phone against her chest. Her lipstick looked smudged. "There are 2 men outside asking questions about Lily," she whispered quickly. "They said they are family friends, but I do not know." She stopped herself. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the front entrance. I followed her gaze. 2 men stood beneath the awning outside the glass doors. Expensive dark coats. No umbrellas despite the rain. They looked out of place at an elementary school. Too still. Too observant. One of them scanned the building instead of checking his phone like every normal waiting parent. "Did they sign in?" I asked quietly. "No." "Did they say who sent them?" "No." Thunder rolled again above Manhattan, low and heavy enough to rattle the front office windows. Something cold slid down my spine. I looked back toward the counseling room instinctively. Lily was still hidden behind my desk chair, watching the entrance through the narrow crack in the doorway like a frightened little animal waiting for danger to pass. "Call security," I told Mrs. Delgado softly, "and lock the front doors until pickup clears." "Claire, do it." My voice surprised both of us. Firm. Immediate. Maybe because every instinct inside me suddenly screamed that something was wrong. The office secretary nodded quickly and reached for the school phone. Outside, one of the men noticed movement near the office window and stepped closer to the entrance. Not aggressive, not threatening, somehow that made it worse. Calm people scared me more than loud ones. I walked back toward the counseling office before he could reach the door. Lily looked up immediately the second I entered. "They are here," she whispered. Her voice cracked slightly. I crouched beside her again. "Who?" She swallowed hard. "The men from before." Before the words hit strangely. Before when? Lily wrapped her little arms around herself tighter. "At home?" My chest tightened. Children said alarming things all the time, especially traumatized children. But something about her expression made me believe her instantly. "Okay," I said carefully, "listen to me. Nobody is getting near you. Understand?" She stared at me silently for a second before nodding once. Then the school lights flickered. Just once. The storm outside intensified hard enough that rain blurred the parking lot into streaks of silver and black. Somewhere down the hallway, a classroom door slammed shut. Lily flinched violently at the sound. Without thinking, I reached for her hand again. "Look at me," I whispered softly. "You are safe here." Her fingers trembled against mine, then the front office buzzer sounded. Sharp. Sudden. Followed by muffled voices from the lobby. One male voice, calm. Controlled. Impossible to hear clearly through the rain and walls. But whatever he said made Mrs. Delgado go completely silent afterward. Lily's eyes widened instantly, not fear this time. Something else. Recognition. "My father," she breathed. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow. Measured. Heavy enough to command attention without trying. I stood instinctively between Lily and the doorway as the counseling room door opened halfway. And for one suspended second, the entire world seemed to stop breathing. He filled the doorway without effort. Tall. Broad shoulders beneath a charcoal overcoat darkened by rain. Black hair swept back neatly despite the storm outside, one hand still adjusting the cuff of an expensive black glove. But it was his eyes that froze me completely. Cold green, sharp enough to cut through silence itself. Damian Moretti looked nothing like the Whispers teachers traded in empty hallways. He looked worse. Because dangerous men were easier to survive when they appeared monstrous. This man looked controlled, elegant. Like violence would never need to raise its voice around him. His gaze landed on Lily first. The hard lines in his face softened almost invisibly. "Lily." She stood so fast, the desk chair rolled backward slightly. For the first time since I met her, emotion crossed her face openly. Relief. Damien stepped into the room, slowly, rainwater gliding from his coat onto the tile floor. Behind him, 2 men in black suits remained outside the doorway like silent shadows. "Are you hurt?" he asked Lily quietly. She shook her head. Then his eyes shifted toward me, calm, assessing. The entire room changed temperature under that stare. "You stayed with my daughter," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, controlled enough that it barely sounded human. I realized suddenly that he was not asking a question. I swallowed once before answering anyway. She was scared. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes then. Brief, dangerous, like a storm passing beneath ice. Damien looked toward the rain-streaked windows where the dark sedan still waited across the street. When he spoke again, his voice turned colder. "That will not happen again." The strange thing about Damien Moretti was not that he looked dangerous, it was that everyone around him reacted before he even spoke. I noticed it immediately. Mrs. Delgado stopped, breathing every time he shifted slightly near the doorway. One of the teachers, walking past the counseling office, nearly dropped her tote bag when she realized who stood inside the room. Even the men beside him stayed unnaturally still, like movement required permission in his presence. But Lily walked directly toward him without hesitation. That was the part I could not stop noticing. The fear disappeared from her face the second she reached him. Damien removed one black leather glove, slowly before crouching in front of her. His expensive coat brushed against the tile floor, while rainwater glimmered along his shoulders beneath the fluorescent lights. "Did they scare you?" he asked quietly. Lily nodded once. Damien closed his eyes briefly like he was swallowing something sharp behind his ribs. Then he touched her hair with surprising gentleness. "I am sorry, tesoro." The Italian word softened his voice in a way that caught me completely off guard. Because men like Damien Moretti were not supposed to sound human. They were supposed to sound cold, ruthless, untouchable. Instead, standing there beside his daughter, he looked exhausted, like someone who had not slept properly in years. Lily reached for his hand tightly. He stood slowly without letting go of her fingers. Then his attention shifted back to me. The full weight of those green eyes settled against my chest like pressure before a storm. "Claire Bennett," he said calmly. My stomach tightened instantly. I had never introduced myself. He noticed my reaction immediately. Of course he did. Men like him probably noticed everything. "The school of administration mentioned you," he added smoothly. Lie. Not cruel, not aggressive. Just obvious enough that we both understood it. I folded my arms instinctively, suddenly aware of how wrinkled my cardigan looked compared to his tailored coat and polished shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Lily was upset," I said carefully. "I stayed with her until someone arrived." Damien studied me for a second too long. Not flirtatious. Not inappropriate. Worse. Intent. Like he was trying to understand something hidden beneath skin and bone. "Most people keep distance from my family," he said quietly. "You did not." I glanced toward Lily. She stood pressed lightly against his side now, still holding his hand. She is a child. Something unreadable flickered across his face again. Then one of the men outside the doorway stepped forward slightly. "Sir," he said low enough that I almost missed it. Damien turned his head barely an inch. That tiny movement alone silenced the man instantly. The room felt colder afterward. Damien looked toward the rain-streaked parking lot again, where the dark sedan finally pulled away from the curb. Slow, smooth, deliberate. Like whoever sat inside wanted us to know they were leaving voluntarily. Lily's fingers tightened around her father's hand, hard enough I noticed even from across the room. Damien noticed too. His jaw flexed once beneath the hallway lights. "Marco," he said quietly without looking away from the window. "Double the security detail tomorrow." "Yes, sir. Security detail. Tomorrow." The words landed strangely in a room filled with children's drawings and broken crayons. I suddenly remembered all the rumors whispered around St. Anne's. The black SUVs parked outside at random hours. Parents pulling their children closer when Lily passed through hallways. Fear did not follow Damien Moretti accidentally. It lived around him permanently. And somehow Lily lived inside that shadow every day. "I should get going," I said softly after a long silence. Damien looked back at me immediately. "You commute to Queens." Another shock of surprise hit me. "How do you know that?" "Your employee file lists your address." Another smooth lie. Too quick this time. His gaze dropped briefly toward the cheap umbrella leaning beside my desk and the frayed canvas tote bag near my chair. Nothing escaped him. "The weather is getting worse," he continued calmly, One of my drivers can take you home. That is not necessary, I insist. I am fine. The air shifted slightly between us then, tiny, almost invisible, but unmistakable. Damien Moretti was a man deeply unused to hearing no. Lily glanced nervously between us like she sensed the tension immediately. Damien looked down at her first before speaking again, softer this time. Controlled. Claire stayed because she wanted to protect you, he told Lily gently. You should thank her. Lily turned toward me slowly. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Thank you for staying. My heart cracked a little hearing it, because children only thanked adults like that when they expected people to leave. I smiled softly at her. You do not have to thank me. Damien watched that exchange carefully, too carefully. He was memorizing something important. Then Lily surprised both of us by stepping away from her father and wrapping her arms around my waist suddenly, small, quick, fragile. But real. I froze completely. So did Damien. Lily almost never initiated physical affection. Even I knew that after only 3 months around her. She pressed her cheek briefly against my cardigan before stepping back again like the moment embarrassed her afterward. Silence filled the counseling office. Heavy. Strange. Damien stared at his daughter for one suspended second before slowly lifting his eyes back to me. Something had changed in them. Something quieter, more dangerous somehow because it carried emotion beneath the control. Miss Bennett, he said softly, my daughter does not trust people easily. Thunder shook the school windows behind us. Rain poured harder against the glass, and for reasons I still could not explain, the way Damien Moretti looked at me in that moment felt less like gratitude and more like the beginning of a problem neither of us understood yet. By the time I finally left St. Anne's that night, Manhattan looked drowned in silver and black. Rain flooded the sidewalks hard enough to blur headlights into glowing streaks across wet pavement, while cold wind curled beneath my coat and slipped straight into my bones. Most teachers had already gone home. The school parking lot sat nearly empty except for 3 black SUVs lined beside the curb, like silent predators, waiting in the storm. Damien Moretti stood near the center vehicle, speaking quietly into his phone, while rain rolled down the sharp angles of his dark coat. Even from 30 feet away, people moved differently around him. Drivers lowered their eyes. Security guards straightened automatically when he glanced the direction. The city itself seemed to shift around his presence. I tightened my grip on my umbrella and tried walking past without looking directly at him. Huge mistake. Miss Bennett. His voice stopped me instantly. Calm, deep, impossible to ignore. I turned slowly despite every instinct telling me not to. Damien slipped his phone into his coat pocket before walking toward me through the rain. No rush. No wasted motion. Just controlled confidence that somehow made the storm itself feel quieter around him. You are still here, he said. So are you. One corner of his mouth almost moved. Not quite a smile. I wanted to make sure Lily got home safely. I glanced toward the nearest SUV where Lily sat inside the back seat wrapped in a blanket, her small face partially visible through rain-speckled glass. She noticed me immediately and lifted her hand in a tiny wave. Something warm pulled unexpectedly in my chest. She seems calmer, I said softly. Damien followed my gaze toward his daughter. The hard edges in his expression softened again almost invisibly. Because of you. The words landed too directly, too personal. I looked away first. Children calm down when they feel heard. No, he said quietly. Lily calms down around you specifically. Rain tapped against my umbrella while passing traffic hissed through flooded Manhattan streets behind us. I suddenly became hyper-aware of how close he stood. Not inappropriate. Not threatening. Just present in a way most people were not. Damien Moretti occupied space completely. My driver is waiting to take you home, he continued calmly. I already told you that is not necessary. And I already told you I insist. There it was again. That quiet push beneath every polite sentence. Not arrogance exactly, habit. A man accustomed to controlling outcomes. I folded my arms tighter against the cold. I appreciate the offer, but I can manage the subway. Damien looked past me toward the dark station entrance half a block away. His jaw tightened slightly. At this hour. People commute at night every day, not while being followed. My heartbeat stumbled. What? His eyes shifted briefly toward the opposite side of the street. I followed his gaze instinctively. A man stood beneath a pharmacy awning pretending to smoke while watching the school entrance through the rain. The second he noticed Damien looking his direction, he turned away too quickly and my stomach dropped cold. You know him? I whispered. No. Damien's voice turned dangerously calm. But I know behavior. One of the suited men near the SUVs immediately moved toward the sidewalk across the street without waiting for instructions. The smoking man disappeared into the rain seconds later. Fast. Nervous. I stared after him with my pulse. Suddenly racing much too hard. That could have been anyone, I said weakly. No. Damien stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice enough that thunder nearly swallowed it. It could not. Something about the certainty in his tone terrified me more than the stranger across the street. Because spoke like a man who had spent years recognizing danger before it arrived. This is exactly why I do not want Lily at that school tomorrow, he murmured almost to himself. Wait, what? His attention returned fully to me. Someone approached the campus today to test security response times. My throat tightened. You think those men were there for Lily? I know they were. Cold spread through my chest despite the raincoat and umbrella and city noise around us. I thought about Lily hiding behind my desk chair. About her shaking hands. About the way she whispered they are here like she already understood fear better than most adults. Has this happened before? I asked quietly. Damien went still for one suspended second. Not physically, emotionally. Like some invisible wall, slid back into place behind his eyes. Yes, just one word, flat, controlled, final, but somehow heavier than a full explanation. I looked toward Lily again inside the SUV. She sat quietly beneath soft interior lights, clutching the edge of her blanket, while watching us through the rain-streaked window. 8 years old and already surrounded by security details and fear and strange men outside school buildings. My chest hurt suddenly. That is not a life for a child, I whispered before I could stop myself. Silence. Dangerous silence. I immediately regretted saying it, but Damien did not get angry. Somehow that made it worse. He looked at me for a very long moment while rainwater slid down the sharp line of his jaw. Do you think I do not know that? He asked quietly. The exhaustion in his voice hit harder than anger ever could have. For the first time since meeting him, I saw something beneath all the control and expensive suits and cold authority. Guilt. Real guilt. Before I could answer, Lily suddenly pushed open the SUV door and stepped out into the rain, holding her blanket around her tiny shoulders. Daddy, she called softly. Damien turned immediately. Like the world itself stopped mattering when his daughter spoke. What is it, Tesoro? Lily looked at him first. Then at me. Can Miss Claire come tomorrow? The rain seemed to pause around us. Damien's eyes lifted slowly back toward mine while thunder rolled low above Manhattan. And something deep in my stomach warned me that saying yes to that little girl might change my life in ways I could not possibly understand yet. There are moments in life that feel small while they are happening. A child asking a simple question, rain falling against black cars. A tired woman standing on a Manhattan sidewalk trying not to make a terrible decision. Then later you realize that was the exact moment everything changed. Lily stood there wrapped in her blanket while rain soaked the edges of her little sneaker. Her green eyes stayed fixed on me with quiet hope, so fragile it physically hurt to look at her too long. Can Miss Claire come tomorrow? She asked again softly. Damien watched me without speaking. The city noise around us faded beneath the storm while headlights blurred across wet pavement and cold wind curled through the school gates. I should have said no immediately. Smart people said no to men like Damien Moretti. Smart people kept distance from dangerous lives and black SUVs and little girls who already understood fear too well. Instead, I heard myself ask, come where? Lily looked up at her father, first like she needed permission to answer. Damien's expression remained unreadable. She means our home, he said calmly. Home. Not house. Not estate. Somehow that made the word heavier. Tomorrow is Saturday, Lily explained quietly. Sophia makes pancakes on Saturday. Her tiny fingers tightened around the blanket again before she added almost too softly to hear, I thought maybe you could stay a while. Something cracked open inside my chest right then. Because children did not ask strangers to stay unless loneliness had become normal to them. Damien noticed the hesitation on my face immediately. Of course he did. There is no pressure, he said smoothly. Lie again. Everything about him carried pressure naturally. Lily simply seems comfortable around you, comfortable enough to invite me to her house after one conversation, I asked before I could stop myself. One of the security men near the SUVs looked mildly alarmed that I spoke to Damien Moretti like that, but Damien himself only studied me quietly. "You protected her before you knew who she was," he replied. That rain slid down the collar of my coat while I tried ignoring the strange warmth creeping into my face. Nobody had looked at me the way Damien did before. Not romantically. Not casually. Intently, like he was searching for proof of something. "I work at her school," I said carefully. "I was doing my job." "No." His voice lowered slightly. "We were doing more than that." Silence stretched between us afterward, heavy enough that even the storm seemed quieter around it. Then Lily tugged lightly on his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. Damien immediately looked down at her. "What is it, Tesoro?" "Please." One word. Tiny. Fragile. But I watched it hit him harder than anything else that night. Damien closed his eyes briefly before exhaling through his nose like surrender tasted unfamiliar. When he looked back at me again, something softer sat behind the cold green of his eyes now, still dangerous, just quieter. "You do not have to decide tonight," he said, "but if you agree, a driver can pick you up tomorrow morning. You already assume I am saying yes." Another almost smile touched the corner of his mouth. Barely there. "No," he said calmly. "I assume Lily hopes you will." That was unfair. Completely unfair. And somehow he knew it. I looked toward Lily again. Her expression stayed careful now, like she regretted asking too much. I recognized that look instantly. Children learned it when life disappointed them too often. "I can stop by for an hour," I heard myself say quietly. Lily's face changed so fast it nearly stole the breath from my lungs. Real happiness. Bright and immediate and heartbreakingly rare. "Really?" she whispered. I nodded once before my common sense could recover. "Really?" Lily smiled. Tiny. Quick. But real enough to transform her entire face. Damien watched her carefully like he had not seen that expression in a very long time. Then his attention shifted slowly back toward me. The look in his eyes this time felt almost dangerous in an entirely different way. Grateful men scared me more than angry ones. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning," he said softly. "I will send a car." "That is not necessary." "I can take the subway." "Claire." My name and his voice sounded different somehow. Lower, firmer. "Please." That surprised me more than anything else all night. A man like Damien Moretti probably never asked twice for anything. I hesitated before finally nodding once. Fine. Good. The single word settled between us with strange intimacy. One of the security men stepped forward, then opening the SUV door for Lily. She climbed inside slowly before pausing halfway into the vehicle. "Good night, Miss Claire." "Good night, Lily." She smiled one more time before disappearing into the warm interior lights of the SUV. Damien remained standing beside me another few seconds while rain soaked the shoulders of his coat. Neither of us moved immediately. Neither of us seemed entirely sure how to end the moment. "You should not walk home alone tonight," he said quietly. "The driver will take you." "Damien, please stop arguing with me for 5 minutes." I blinked once in surprise. Then unexpectedly, against all logic and survival instinct, I laughed softly, actual laughter. The sound seemed to catch him off guard too, because he stared at me for one suspended second like he had never expected to hear it. Something shifted in the air afterward. Subtle. Dangerous. Human. Damien opened the SUV door. For me himself, despite the rain pouring harder around us now. "After you, Miss Bennett." I should have walked away. Some part of me understood that even then. But instead I climbed into the black SUV beside the daughter of one of the most feared men in Manhattan while thunder rolled above the city, and Damien Moretti followed us inside. The inside of Damien Moretti's SUV smelled like rain, leather, and expensive cologne that lingered quietly in the air long after he stopped moving. Manhattan blurred outside the tinted windows while water streaked across the glass in silver lines and jazz played softly through hidden speakers. Somewhere above us, Lily sat beside me, hugging her blanket against her chest, while Damien occupied the seat across from us with the kind of calm control that made the entire vehicle feel smaller somehow. Nobody spoke for the first few minutes. The silence was not awkward exactly, just heavy. Like every person inside that SUV carried thoughts too complicated to say out loud. I watched city lights flash across Damien's face whenever traffic signals changed outside. Green, red, gold, each color sharp in different angles of him. The scar near his jaw became visible for half a second beneath a passing street lamp before disappearing again into shadow. He caught me noticing it immediately. Of course he did. "Long day?" he asked quietly. The question surprised me enough that I answered honestly before thinking. "Very." His gaze dropped briefly toward the stack of folders still balanced on my lap. You stay late often? Most schools are understaffed and underpaid. I looked up sharply. Damien leaned back slightly against the dark leather seat, one arm resting near the window while rain rolled softly beyond the glass. You work 2 additional tutoring jobs, he continued calmly. One on Tuesdays and Thursdays in Brooklyn. Another online during weekends. My stomach tightened instantly. Did you investigate me? Lily looked nervously between us. Damien noticed immediately and softened his tone before responding. I protect people close to my daughter we met 6 hours ago, and yet Lily trusts you more than she trusts most adults. The quiet certainty in his voice unsettled me because some part of me feared he might be right. Lily stared down at her blanket while tiny raindrops slid down the SUV windows beside her. Miss Claire smells like books, she whispered suddenly. Both Damien and I looked at her in surprise. She shrugged shyly beneath the attention. And cinnamon. I blinked once before laughing softly. That is probably because the teacher's lounge coffee is terrible. Lily smiled faintly at that. Damien watched the exchange carefully, too carefully. Like every smile from his daughter mattered enough to memorize. The driver turned onto the bridge leading toward Queens while headlights reflected across flooded pavement below us. How long have you worked at St. Anne's? Damien asked. 3 months. Before that, public schools mostly, counseling internships, substitute teaching. He nodded, once like he already knew every answer before asking you, like helping children. Most days. And the other days I looked out the rain-streaked window before answering. The other days I wonder if caring too much eventually breaks people. Silence settled quietly after that. Strange silence, not empty, thoughtful. Damien's gaze remained on me long enough that I felt it even without looking directly at him. My wife used to say something similar, he murmured finally. The air changed instantly. Lily lowered her eyes. Damien rarely sounded uncertain, but those 7 words carried something fragile beneath them. Grief, maybe the kind buried deep enough to survive years. I am sorry, I said softly. He gave one small nod. So am I. Nobody spoke afterward. The city outside faded quieter the farther we moved from Manhattan, while rain softened into a steady whisper against the SUV roof. Eventually, the driver pulled beside my apartment building in Queens. The old brick complex looked especially tired beneath flickering streetlights and puddles reflecting broken neon from the laundromat across the street. I suddenly became painfully aware of how different my world looked compared to Damien's. You live here? One of the security men asked before catching himself too late. Damien's expression hardened instantly. That will be enough, Carlo. Sorry, sir. Heat crept into my face despite the cold rain outside. I reached for the door handle quickly. Thank you for the ride. Damien stepped out first anyway, naturally. Like opening doors for people existed somewhere beneath all the danger and authority wrapped around him. Rain soaked the shoulders of his black coat within seconds while he held an umbrella above us both. You really do not need to walk me upstairs, I said quietly. Humor me, I should have argued. Instead, I let him follow me through the narrow lobby, smelling faintly of old radiator heat and laundry detergent. The elevator had been broken for 2 weeks, so we climbed 3 flights while thunder rolled softly outside the building. Halfway up, Damien glanced toward the peeling paint along the stairwell walls. Your landlord should fix this place. Welcome to Queens. Another tiny, almost smile touched his mouth. By the time we reached my apartment door, my pulse felt strangely uneven beneath my ribs. Maybe because Damien Moretti, standing outside apartment 3B, looked unreal somehow, like someone had dropped a storm into an ordinary hallway. 10 o'clock tomorrow, he said quietly once I unlocked the door. You really assume I will not change my mind overnight? His eyes held mine for one suspended second. No, he answered softly. I think you already care about her too much to stay away. The terrifying thing was that he might have been right. Before I could answer, Lily's small voice drifted from the stairwell behind him. Good night, Miss Claire. I looked down. She stood 3 steps below her father, wrapped in her blanket again with sleepy green eyes and damp curls framing her face. My chest tightened painfully. Good night, Lily. She hesitated before adding quietly, Thank you for not being scared of us. The words hit harder than they should have, because children only noticed fear when they saw it constantly. Damien went completely still beside me. Lily looked immediately embarrassed afterward, like she had said too much. But I could not stop staring at her, 8 years old and already apologizing for the life around her. I am not scared of you, I whispered softly. Lily smiled one last time before Damien guided her gently back downstairs, but just before disappearing around the stairwell corner, Damien looked back at me over his shoulder. And the expression in his green eyes warned me that tonight had already changed something neither of us could undo anymore. I barely slept that night. Every time thunder rattled the windows above my apartment radiator, I saw Lily's frightened eyes again. Then Damien's. Cold green, and impossibly focused like he already understood things about me I had not admitted to myself yet. By 8 the next morning, Queens smelled like wet concrete and coffee drifting from the deli downstairs. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror trying to decide why I felt nervous about visiting a child for pancakes. That alone should have been enough warning. I chose a cream sweater and jeans, because anything more formal felt ridiculous for a Saturday morning. Then I spent 10 full minutes arguing with myself about canceling entirely. Smart choice. Safe choice. Normal choice. At exactly 9:58, a black SUV stopped outside my building. Of course it did. I should not have been surprised anymore, but somehow seeing it parked beside the cracked curb outside my tiny apartment still felt surreal. Mrs. Green from apartment 2 nearly dropped her grocery bags while staring through the lobby window. "Claire Bennett," she whispered as I passed her. "Who exactly are you dating?" "Nobody," I answered too quickly, which only made her more suspicious. The driver opened the SUV door before I even reached the sidewalk. "Good morning, Miss Bennett." Inside the vehicle, soft instrumental music played quietly while Manhattan moved beneath gray skies outside the windows. No Damien today. Relief should have followed that realization. Instead, something strange settled in my chest. Disappointment, maybe. I hated that possibility immediately. 40 minutes later, the city disappeared behind iron gates taller than anything I had ever seen outside movies. Security cameras tracked the SUV while stone walls stretched endlessly around a property that looked less like a home and more like a private kingdom hidden inside Manhattan itself. "This is insane," I muttered softly before I could stop myself. The driver almost smiled. Most people say that the first time the estate emerged slowly through rows of dark trees and fountains glistening from last night's storm. The mansion itself looked carved from old money and secrets. Massive windows, black stone, iron balconies curling upward against cloudy skies, beautiful in the kind of way that made ordinary people feel small standing near it. My stomach twisted harder the closer we got. I suddenly understood why Lily seemed lonely all the time. Places this large echoed too much. The front doors opened before I reached them. A woman in her late 50s stepped forward, wearing an elegant navy dress and warm eyes that immediately softened when she saw me. "Miss Bennett," she said with a thick Italian accent. Finally, like they had been waiting all morning, "I am Sophia. Claire." "Yes, we know." Her smile widened slightly. "Lily has spoken of nothing else since last night." Heat crept into my face before I could stop it. Sophia led me through the mansion while polished marble floors reflected morning light beneath crystal chandeliers overhead. Everything smelled faintly like espresso and cedarwood and fresh flowers. Expensive. Elegant, untouchable, but strangely quiet for a place so massive. "Where is Lily?" I asked. Sophia glanced toward the staircase with amusement hidden behind her expression, trying to choose between 3 sweaters, because she wishes to look pretty for you. My chest tightened painfully at that. "She does not have to impress me." "Ah," Sophia said softly. "That is why she already loves you." Before I could answer, quick footsteps echoed from upstairs. Lily appeared at the top of the staircase wearing a pale green sweater with her curls brushed neatly back from her face. The second she saw me, her entire expression lit up in a way I still was not prepared for. "Miss Claire." She hurried downstairs so fast Sophia winced nervously beside me. Lily stopped just short of throwing herself directly into my arms, like she remembered at the last second that children around this house probably did not do things like that often. So I solved the problem for her. I crouched slightly and opened my arms first. Lily hugged me immediately, tight. Small arms wrapped around my waist, while her cheek pressed briefly against my sweater. I felt her relax almost instantly. Behind us, silence filled the foyer. Heavy silence. I looked up instinctively. Damien stood near the entrance to the dining room watching us, dark charcoal sweater, black slacks, no tie to somehow that made him look even more dangerous because the expensive control remained while the formal armor disappeared. His gaze stayed fixed on Lily, holding me like he could not entirely believe what he was seeing. "Good morning," he said quietly. The deep warmth of his voice curled strangely through the enormous room. Morning. My voice sounded thinner than usual. Damien stepped closer slowly while Lily remained tucked against my side without hesitation. The sight visibly affected him, tiny shift in his jaw. Smoke inhaled through his nose, but enough that I noticed. She did not sleep with the hallway light on last night, he said softly. First time in almost a year. I looked down at Lily in surprise. She suddenly became fascinated with the sleeve of my sweater. Lily, she believes you make things feel safe, Damien continued before she could grow embarrassed. The way he said it felt too personal somehow, too honest. Sophia cleared her throat gently from beside us. Breakfast is getting cold. Lily grabbed my hand immediately afterward. Come see the pancakes. She pulled me toward the dining room while Damien followed several steps behind us in complete silence. But I could still feel his eyes on me, calm, intent. Unsettling in the worst possible way, because deep down some dangerous part of me was beginning to realize I liked the way Damien Moretti looked at me. The dining room looked like something from an old movie about powerful families with expensive secrets. Sunlight filtered through towering windows overlooking rain-soaked gardens, while silver coffee trays reflected warm morning light across black marble floors. The table itself was low enough to seat 20 people comfortably, but only 3 places had been set. That detail bothered me more than the size of the mansion. Empty chairs always told the truth about lonely houses. Lily sat beside me immediately, close enough that her shoulder brushed my sweater every few seconds while Sophia placed plates of blueberry pancakes in front of us. The smell of cinnamon and fresh espresso filled the room, softening the sharp edges of the enormous estate around us. Damien took the seat across from us instead of at the head of the table. Another detail I noticed immediately. Men obsessed with control usually position themselves where everyone could see them. But Damien seemed more interested in watching Lily than ruling the room. Sophia makes the best pancakes in New York, Lily informed me quietly while cutting hers carefully into perfect little squares. Sophia smiled from near the coffee cart. Finally, someone in this house appreciates me. Damien lifted his espresso cup slightly. I appreciate you. No, Sophia replied dryly. You tolerate me because I've raised you. To my complete shock, Damien laughed softly. Actual laughter. Low and brief but undeniably real. The sound transformed him for one suspended second, younger somehow. Human. I stared before I could stop myself. Damien noticed immediately, of course he did. What? He asked calmly. Heat rushed into my face. Nothing. Another almost smile touched his mouth before he took another sip of espresso. Lily watched us carefully over the edge of her orange juice glass. Children always notice tension adults tried hiding. Daddy almost never eats breakfast with me, she said suddenly. Silence settled lightly across the table. Damien lowered his coffee cup slowly. Lily, it is true. She shrugged without looking up. You are always working. Guilt flickered across Damien's face fast enough most people would have missed it. I did not. I am trying to keep you safe, he said quietly. Lily pushed another piece of pancake around her plate with her fork. I know. The sadness in her tiny voice hurt more than if she had yelled. Damien went silent afterward, staring down into his espresso like the dark liquid might somehow offer answers he did not have. Sophia quietly excused herself a moment later, leaving the 3 of us alone beneath the soft clink of silverware and rain tapping against distant windows. I looked toward Lily carefully. Do you want to show me your drawings after breakfast? Her entire face brightened immediately. Really? Of course. Lily nodded enthusiastically before finally taking a real bite of pancake. Damien watched the exchange with that same unreadable intensity that kept unsettling me. She stopped drawing after her mother died, he said quietly. The words landed heavily between us. Lily lowered her eyes again. My chest tightened painfully. Damien, I said softly. Warning in my tone, he understood immediately. Sorry, Tesoro. Lily gave one tiny shrug like apologies were normal around subjects too painful to touch directly. I suddenly understood something terrifying then. This family loved each other deeply, but grief had turned their home into a museum where nobody knew how to speak normally anymore. After breakfast, Lily practically dragged me upstairs toward the east wing while Damien followed behind us, at a slower pace with one hand in his pocket and coffee still in the other. The hallway walls were lined with paintings in black and white, photographs of stern-looking men beside, elegant women wearing diamonds and distant expressions. Wealth stretched through every inch of the estate, but warmth did not. Lily's bedroom surprised me immediately. Soft sage green walls, bookshelves overflowing with fairy tales and astronomy guides, stuffed animals lined carefully across a window seat overlooking the gardens. Normal little girl things hidden inside an extraordinary prison. These are mine, Lily whispered proudly before opening a sketchbook on her desk. Most of the drawings showed trees and oceans and stars, quiet things, lonely things. Then halfway through the sketchbook, I froze. One drawing showed 3 figures standing beneath rain. A little girl holding hands with a man in black beside a woman wearing a cream-colored sweater. Me. My heartbeat stumbled hard enough I felt it in my throat. Lily, she suddenly looked nervous. I know it is bad. No. My voice came out softer than I intended. It is beautiful. Behind me, silence filled the room again. I turned slowly. Damien stood near the doorway staring at the drawing with an expression so raw it almost did not look like him anymore. There was grief there. Longing to, but underneath both sat something even more dangerous. Hope. Real hope. The kind people tried not to feel after life destroyed them once already. His eyes lifted slowly to mine. She has not drawn another person in over 2 years, he said quietly. The room suddenly felt too small for breathing properly. Lily looked between us uncertainly while rain rolled gently against the windows, overlooking the gardens below. Then somewhere downstairs, a sharp buzzing sound echoed through the mansion. Damien's expression changed instantly. Every trace of softness disappeared beneath cold control so fast it startled me. One of the security men appeared outside the bedroom door seconds later. "Sir," he said carefully, "there is an issue at the south gate." Damien's jaw tightened once. "Handle it. We already tried." The man hesitated before adding quietly, "He says he will only speak to you personally." Lily immediately moved closer to me without even realizing she was doing it. Damien noticed. And the look that crossed his face right then told me whatever waited downstairs had just followed danger directly into this house. The terrifying thing about Damien Moretti was how quickly warmth disappeared from him. 1 second he stood in Lily's bedroom staring at her drawing like a man remembering how to breathe again. The next, every trace of emotion vanished beneath cold control, so complete it almost looked mechanical. "Stay here," he told Lily quietly. She immediately grabbed my hand tighter. Damien noticed. His eyes lingered briefly on her fingers, curled around mine before he looked toward the security man waiting outside the bedroom. "Marco," he said calmly, "who is at my gate?" "Vincent Caruso." The name changed the entire atmosphere of the hallway instantly. Even I felt it, and I had no idea who Vincent Caruso was. Damien went completely still for 1 suspended second before exhaling slowly through his nose. "That is not possible." Marco shifted uncomfortably. "Apparently it is." Lily pressed closer against my side. "Daddy?" Damien looked at her immediately, and the dangerous edge vanished from his expression fast enough to make my chest tighten. "It is nothing to Zorro." Lie. Even Lily knew it. "You promised nobody bad would come here anymore," she whispered softly. Something sharp flickered across Damien's face then, not anger. Pain. Real pain. He stepped toward her carefully like sudden movements might break something fragile between them. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "Nobody is touching you." "Understand?" Lily nodded, but her grip on my hand never loosened. Damien looked toward me afterward, long enough that I understood what he was asking without him saying it directly. "Stay with her. Protect her." The terrifying thing was that some part of me already wanted to. "I will be downstairs," he said softly. Then he disappeared into the hallway with Marco beside him while security guards repositioned themselves outside the bedroom doors almost immediately afterward. The click of radios echoed faintly through the corridor. Lily stared at the doorway long after her father vanished downstairs. "Who is Vincent?" I asked gently once the silence stretched too long. Lily's shoulders tightened beneath her sweater. "Daddy used to fight with him." Used to, past tense. Children noticed details adults thought they hid. "Fight how?" She looked down at the carpet instead of answering directly. "After Mommy died, Daddy stopped smiling when Vincent came over." Cold moved slowly through my chest. I sat beside Lily on the window seat overlooking the rain-soaked gardens while distant thunder rolled across the estate grounds. Somewhere downstairs, muffled voices echoed faintly through the mansion. Calm voices. Somehow that scared me more than shouting would have. "Do you miss your mom?" I asked carefully. Lily nodded immediately. Every day, her answer came so quietly I almost missed it. What was she like? For the first time all morning, Lily smiled without hesitation. Warm. The single word filled the room unexpectedly. She sang while cooking. Daddy says the house got quieter after she left. My chest tightened painfully because children always explained grief in the simplest way as possible. Daddy loved her very much, Lily whispered. He still does. Before I could answer, the bedroom door opened suddenly. Damien stepped inside alone this time. His dark sweater sleeves were rolled slightly now, exposing strong forearms marked faintly with old scars beneath expensive watches and controlled elegance. But it was his face that stopped me cold. Calm, too calm, like every emotion had been locked somewhere dangerous beneath the surface. Everything okay? I asked quietly before I could stop myself. Damien's eyes shifted toward me slowly. Yes. Lie again. Worse this time. Lily climbed off the window seat immediately and walked toward him carefully. Is Vincent gone? Damien crouched, slightly in front of her. Yes, tesoro. Did he upset you? Silence. Brief, heavy. Then Damien touched her curls gently. No. Another lie. Lily studied him for a second like she knew it too, but decided not to push further. Children in grieving homes learned early when adults were too fragile for truth. Can Miss Clare still stay a while? Damien looked up at me unexpectedly. The intensity in his eyes hit harder now because something darker lived beneath it after whatever happened downstairs, if she wants to. Lily turned toward me hopefully. I should have left then. Smart women left before dangerous families became personal. Instead, I heard myself say I can stay a little longer. Relief crossed Lily's face instantly. Damien watched that reaction with the same quiet focus he gave everything involving his daughter. Sophia is making hot chocolate downstairs, he said softly. Would you like some? Lily nodded immediately before hurrying from the room ahead of us. The second she disappeared into the hallway, silence swallowed the bedroom whole. Damien remained near the doorway, watching me with an expression I could not fully read anymore. You do not have to stay, he said quietly. I know. Then why are you? The honest answer terrified me too much to say out loud. Because somewhere between rainy school hallways and pancakes and little drawings in green sketchbooks, this family had stopped feeling like strangers. Lily should not be alone when she is scared, I answered finally. Something shifted in Damien's face then. Tiny, almost invisible. But enough that the air between us suddenly felt too warm despite the storm outside. You keep doing that, he murmured softly. Doing what? Caring about her like it cost you nothing. My heartbeat turned uneven beneath my rib. Damien stepped slightly closer while rain rolled softly against the massive bedroom windows behind us. People usually care because they want something from me, he continued quietly. You seem to care despite what I am. I do not even know what you are. A dangerous, almost smile touched his mouth then. Sad somehow. That is probably the only reason you are still here. Before I could answer, a loud crash echoed somewhere downstairs. Not violent, just sudden enough to make Lily scream faintly from the hallway below. Damien moved instantly. 1 second he stood in front of me, the next he was already running toward the door, with every trace of warmth gone from his face again. And, for the first time since entering his world, real fear settled cold and heavy inside my chest.